Hey everybody, it's your pal Mike Zombie, and this week we're going to talk about Zombie, or Zombie 2, the other title, from 1979. This is Lucio Fulci's probably arguably most famous horror film, and it's interesting to think that this was supposedly an unofficial part 2 to Dawn of the Dead that George Romero did in 78, so this came a year after, though it's clearly I don't know, different zombie types. So George Romero didn't really explain why the zombies were taking over. And Fulci kind of does in the sense that he gives us a couple of choices. I'm getting way ahead of myself. Okay, let's start at the beginning. A sailboat is kind of bopping around the harbor in New York City around Staten Island. It's kind of coming in and no one seems to be at the helm. It's kind of rocking back and forth. The sails are kind of down and it's almost hitting everything in sight. So, of course, the Coast Guard is called out. The police are called out. And they hop on the ship and it's just disgusting. The sails are down, but the ship is dirty. They look inside and there's just half-eaten food everywhere. You hear flies, you see bugs crawling around. It's pretty gross. And then a giant fat zombie the size of Dom DeLuise busts through a door the size that olive oil can be behind and attacks one of the police officers. The other cop shoots him and he falls overboard. Of course, now they need to do an investigation to find out whose boat this is and just what the hell's going on. Anyways, young woman shows up on the boat and she's like, hey, this is my dad's boat. Where's my dad? And they're like, well, that's what we want to know. She hasn't heard from him for a few months because he went out to an island to visit some friends. So later on, the boat's still under police guard because an officer was killed there and they're doing an investigation. She sneaks onto the boat and bumps into a reporter who's also there. The two of them team up and decide to see if they can find out exactly what's going on because the reporter found a note from not the big zombie guy, but from her father that said, I'm here. I'm sick. So the two decide to see if they can find their way out to the island of Matu to see if they can find her father. So the reporter calls his boss, and he's like, man, I'm going to get you such a great story. So the boss cops for the tickets, and they fly some Caribbean island. I'm assuming they're in, wherever they are. They team up with a couple who have a boat that do some sightseeing, and they're like, oh, come on, man, will you take us to Matu, blah, 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 we're trying to find her father. And they're like, well, if you pay for your part of the food, sure, we'll take you out there. But, the natives talk about voodoo. So they're putting out there in the ocean, and the guy's wife is like, hey, hold on, I want to go for a swim and take some pictures. So she, of course, strips down to her skivvies, and she's topless, hops in the water, and she's swimming around taking pictures of fish, and sure enough, a zombie kind of grabs her, goes like underwater, and wants to pick a fight with her. Now, this is interesting because this is at the bottom of the ocean, and far off in the distance, we see a little tiny, well, it looks a little tiny from where we are, but we see the island. So we know that either he walked all the way out there, and we're talking visually, it looks like it's a good 10, 15 miles or so, or he just fell off a boat. And they never do address that. But what's kick-ass is there's a shark chasing this lady around down below. And the shark just grabs it and starts fighting with the shark, which it was an amazing scene. I think the shark was either sick or injured or something because, there's no reason for any shark to put up with a guy grabbing it the way the man was. So anyway, so he starts fighting with the shark under the water. The shark bites his arms off, and the shark just looks really annoyed, like it just wants to leave. They continue out to the island, but the shark rams the boat and messes up the drive shaft or whatever. So they're like, well, we can either try to get to the island or we can putter around. They decide to go to the island, which, of course, is the worst idea in the history of man. Because on this island is the doctor and his wife, and they're a nice little house, and a old church which has been converted into not a laboratory, but a doctor's office, because everybody slowly is getting incredibly sick. And when they die, a few minutes later, they come back from the dead and, of course, have a taste for, you guessed it, human flesh. So he's trying to figure out what the cause is, how to fix it, how to reverse it. They mention this several times, but they really don't show him doing anything other than shooting his patients in the head. And listen, I know this is a classic. It's an honored classic. It's for a lot of people, it's their go-to horror movie. But a lot of this didn't make sense to me because it's the things they don't show that could have made the difference. He's a doctor. He's a scientist. His wife is cracking up. She just wants to get the fuck out of this place. And she's panicked. He says, I'm going to go down to the hospital. And she says, they found another? Did they find another? Where was it? Because the natives are finding these zombies and I guess bringing them to him for him to destroy or whatever they're doing. They really don't explain that either. He says, well, they found it on the other side of the island. And she's like, well, how long till they start finding them here? That's her big concern. She wants to get out. So we go to his hospital. It's a bunch of people with a really bad disease, and they're all laying there. They're all resting, and they're all apparently dying. Some are further along than others, and they die and come back. He wraps them up in a sheet, and when they return, shoots them in the head. The cause given, pretty much, they keep mentioning voodoo. And he keeps saying, well, as a man of science, as a doctor, I can't accept that. There's got to be some other reason. I'm trying to figure out what it is. But again, they don't show him doing anything aside from looking. There's one scene where he looks at a slide of some blood, takes out a little needle, takes some of his blood, puts it on top of that blood, and stares at it again. That is the start and finish of his demonstration throughout the entire movie of him trying to solve the crime of what's going on with the blood and the zombies. So our friends in the boat end up making their way to the island, finding the doctor, and he says, oh, yeah, I remember your dad. He was a good man. He was a friend of mine, and he died. And they show a little, scene. They go back with the previously on on this episode of Zombie. They show the father dying in the hospital. He gets shot in the head like everybody else, and everybody gets buried. So the people are like, well, we're going to go cruise around the island. He goes, well, go see my wife and see how she's doing. Now, what's interesting about the wife is she is probably one of the better kill scenes in a zombie movie. She's showering. She comes out and dries off, and a zombie is in her house. She tries to hide behind a door, shoves a little chest up against it, and he punches through, grabs her by her hair, and slowly and very dramatically pulls her eyeball first into a jagged, large splinter, which, of course, just destroys her eye. I was just thinking, now I've seen this movie before, so it wasn't like this was shock, but I'm just saying to myself, why wouldn't you just take your right hand to reach up and pull that splinter away? You got two hands. But again, this is one of those movies that people really like to fuck with you if you criticize it. So, they go see the doctor's wife, realize there's like 6 zombies in the house eating her, and they desperately start trying to get back to the doctor's lab. So now their goal is to find their way back to the doctor because they realize there's zombies starting to pop up everywhere. And driving back, they wreck their little Land Rover, so now they're on foot. One guy's got a broken ankle, and of course, everything's coming up out of the ground. Apparently, the natives were burying people that had the zombie juice in them for a long, long time because they're all suddenly rising up. They finally make it back to the barn. Through a bunch of mishaps, everybody starts to die. The doctor, who's going to settle this shit and get it all set up straight, dies. His helper dies and comes back almost immediately and eats bites one of the ladies. And just everybody is just dropping dead. All these zombies are pushing their way in, so they make they're inside of a barn, which has been converted to use as like a little hospital area. So a bunch of patients who have like the malaria or whatever are in there, sleeping, how they quarantine. And of course, zombies are pushing their way in, so they start firing Molotov cocktails at the zombies and shooting them. And basically the whole barn goes up in flames and they take off. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? They turn and pause and look back as they're about to run away. And my thought was, holy crap, you're burning all the zombies down, but all the patients that were alive inside are now burning too. They don't really address that, but they kind of implied that. unless they all became zombies. So now they realize they're just about the only people left on the island. The zombies are everywhere, so they're trying to fight their way back to their boat. Of course, the skipper gets bit before they take off, so he's going to be a zombie, and they're on the sailboat headed back towards land with the drive shaft that's kind of busted, taking their time. They lock the captain up in a room down below because he's clearly becoming a zombie because of the bite. And they're kind of puttering along, and they hear on the radio that America is under attack. The zombies have taken over. They kind of show us as we leave to the credits, New York City's being overrun as the zombies come across the bridges. You know, there's just nonstop. What I liked about this movie, the acting was pretty good. A few characters were kind of flat. The natives were tough to understand, but everybody else was pretty clear and acted pretty well. The zombies in this movie apparently had a shoestring budget. The zombies looked great. They really did. And that's if you've seen the poster with the zombie whose face is kind of gnarled up and he's got 3 or 4 crooked, jagged teeth and a whole bunch of worms in his eye, you've probably seen this poster. Zombies were great. They really were. I would say even better in a lot of ways than like Dawn of the Dead, which came out a year prior. These zombies, I don't know, seemed a bit more organic. I enjoyed the zombies in this film. The storyline, it was pretty ambitious. I mean, a lot of elements came into it that I'm not going through. The whole Caribbean thing, I don't know. It was different, and I like the fact that they took the zombie. They kind of weren't afraid to go back to the voodoo approach as opposed to we don't know. Maybe it's an asteroid, kind of stuff. What I didn't like about this movie, I don't know. I don't really have any dislikes, aside from the stuff like, wait and just grab the splinter and move it away with your hand, so forth. Those kind of things, or whatever, and that's petty. I really have no gripes to this film. It was a good movie. It's got something like 7 stars out of 10 with like 2,600 people voting on it. I don't know if I would put it up too high, but like I said, it is enjoyable. You should see it. If you've never seen a Fulci film, this would be a great spot to start, especially if you like the zombies, if you know what I mean. So this is Zombie or Zombie 2 from 1979, and I enjoyed it. I think you will too. It's just gory enough to be, a good one. I don't know. At least it had real locations. Okay, wasn't all done in the same warehouse. So that's all for this week. I will talk to you soon. Bye.